Hello everyone, today we will discuss about database administration. The database administrator or DBA is a key player in information technology. Most businesses cannot operate without an operational database and someone to administer it. The DBA is responsible for all of the data within a corporation. Database development ethical pitfalls. We have data discrepancies in database development. What if your boss wants you to keep quiet? DBA password use and misuse. Should you implement changes? And lastly, DBA qualifications. When are you qualified? Data discrepancies in database development. What if your boss wants you to keep quiet? Discrepancies in data can occur for many reasons and range from incorrect data input to data conversion problems. The worst type of data discrepancy is one in which an employee is stealing from the company. In this type of circumstance, financial data shows balanced discrepancies. The following is an example of this worst case scenario. You are consulting for a company, building an executive information system. When you delve into their legacy data that you ported to a data warehouse, you discover a major financial discrepancy in their accounting records. You report this to their Chief Financial Officer or CFO, who looks at the data and keeps you at the office until late night in the evening executing queries. During this time, he is obviously very upset. He tells you to keep everything completely confidential to him only and not tell anyone in the company or outside of it. What would you do in this circumstance? For conservative, it is never a good idea to keep a major discrepancy a secret. If you have a good relationship with the IT manager, you should get them in the loop on what is happening. Just explain to CFO that you need to have your manager aware of what is going on since you report to him. And in liberal, when something heated happens like this issue, it is best to take the approach of wait and see. If you only would jump the gun and notify authorities of someone else in the company, you may find yourself in the midst of a very bad scene. Wait a few days, see what happens, and then determine if you are legally required to communicate anything about this event. DBA password use and misuse. Should you implement changes? Using DBA password for purposes that have nothing to do with the database administration is a common problem for DBAs working in database development efforts. The following issue addresses this ethical scenario of allowing access to DBA password for development work. You begin working for a new company and discover that they use DBA password when writing an embedded structured query language or SQL code. You know this puts the entire database and data at risk. Do you refuse to allow the practice of using DBA password? For conservative, you should not allow developers to use DBA password in their applications when executing embedded SQL code. Immediately change DBA password and issue a memorandum to developers that DBA password will no longer work in their code. They may get mad and have to rewrite some code, but that is better than a breach in database security. And in liberal, the reality is that developers often need database administrative privileges. There is no sense in making all of the developers hate you by changing the DBA password and requiring them to rewrite endless passcode. What is done is done. Encourage the developers to use other logins and passwords whenever possible within their code. If you wreck the boat on your first day, you can guarantee you will be out of the door in no time. Implementing changes as a new DBA to a certain company can be tricky. The development team is used to working a certain way and will resent you for requiring them to do a lot of work. Whether you choose to be conservative and change the password, or you choose to be liberal and leave it, you may also want to consider implementing a development logon and password for future work. This development logon and password allows the developers to perform some administrative privileges but does not provide the global access of DBA password. DBA qualifications. When are you qualified? Qualifications for DBA are vast. It is not always easy to determine if someone is qualified for the role unless you have experienced DBA on staff that can perform a technical evaluation of potential new hires. When putting yourself forward as a DBA, there are many ethical questions you should ask yourself. First and foremost, are you truly qualified? The following issues illustrate such a problem. You have been a database programmer for several years and have been studying database administration. You apply for a job as a DBA and in your resume, describe your previous database development work as database administration to get you in the door. You can feel you can handle the DBA job, but do not have the applicable work experience that would otherwise make you qualified. Is it ethical to put yourself forward as DBA without the formal education and job experience? For conservative, it is never appropriate to put yourself forward as DBA if you do not have certification in database administration. Enroll in night courses to learn the necessary skills required to be an effective DBA. A DBA is not a job that can learn as you go. You are trusted with company's information. Any mistake of your part could result in distrust consequences for the company that employed you. And for a liberal, if you know that you possess the skills of DBA but not the formal training or experience, there is nothing wrong with honestly communicating that accepting a job as a DBA. Many people in the IT industry are self-taught and sometimes they are the best ones for the job. Self-taught IT professionals are commonplace in the industry. Self-taught professionals often end up in DBA positions. This is due to the demand for DBAs compared to the supply of them. However, there is a significant difference between the self-taught professionals who are skilled and those who are deluding themselves. If you are self-taught and want to apply for a DBA job, take a skills assessment test to determine if you have what is realistically required when ethically putting yourself forward for the role of a DBA. The next topic would be handling data, program, and hardware backups. Under this are failing to perform required data backup. What if you missed one? Handling damaged backup disk. What if you're to blame? Selling old backup drivers. What if your company cannot use them anymore? And the last two are administrating data types and allocating memory. Are you looking at the big picture? And purchasing third-party database solution. A risky business? Failing to perform required data backup. What if you miss one? You failed to perform a database backup on Friday as mandated by the technical manager. Do you wait until the next scheduled backup or do you go ahead and do it on the following Monday when you remember? For conservative, you should immediately perform the database backup on Monday. Performing a backup during operation hours will slow down the production system. But it is more important to have the data backup. You have made a huge error by forgetting the backup and you should immediately account for it. And for liberal, the reality is that some companies do not even perform weekly backups. If you do the backup right away, the production system will slow down. Your error will become grossly obvious to everyone in the company and business as usual will be affected. Wait until the end of the day on Monday and stay late to perform the database backup in some cases. Database backups are an important part of the business contingency plan and should be done like clockwork. If for some reason you are unable to perform one due to system changes, are out sick on the scheduled day of backup, or forgot altogether, it is wise to do it on the next available evening. This will ensure that if there is an overall system failure, there will be current backup data and data structures for the implementation of contingency efforts. Handling damaged backup disk. What if you're to blame? You are in the process of reconfiguring your boss's computer and drinking a cup of coffee. You have offloaded all his sensitive data onto backup disk and you reformatted his hard drive. When you go to set down the coffee, it spills onto the backup disk containing all of your boss's data. What would you do? For conservative, clean the desk and see if the data has been damaged. If it has, go immediately to your boss and explain what happened. Maybe he has another backup at home or on work network drive. For liberal, you should have backed the data up on the network rather than on backed up disk. Finish your work, copy what you can onto newly formatted drive and pray he does not know what is missing. Odds are he will not notice the difference. Redundancy is very important when performing any type of system backup, be it an entire database or the information on a laptop. It is always advisable to keep a hard copy of all the data on an external hard drive, as well as a copy on the network or on the disk. Triple redundancy will save a lot of problems and possible lost jobs.
Selling old backup drives. What if your company cannot use them anymore? Making personal money from retired hardware or software is tricky issue. Often there is not any corporate policy to dictate what to do in these circumstances. Consider security risk above all else first, then make the determination of what you should do to face with this type of circumstance. In most cases, the only secure means of handling this situation is to destroy the old backup drives. If, however, you decide to sell them, you may want to add a clause that you supervise the deletion of old data on those drives. If may be worth it if you can obtain the significant amount of money from the sale of the drives. Administrating data types and allocating memory. Are you looking at the big picture? Most people have a hard time looking at the big picture and the minute technical details at the same time. If you're someone who can do it, that is wonderful. But it is not realistic to expect it for the majority of IT personnel. The DBA on a development effort has the responsibility to build a correct database functionality first and assist financial result for those efforts. Second, this is assuming that they are not considering anything astronomical in price with little value return for the company. Purchasing third-party database solution, a risky business. Accepting money as a referral fee or commission for purchasing a product is a tricky business. If you decide to do this, you should really consider what type of people you would now be in a partnership with. Are their ethics a little shaky? You may have problems down the road with this type of vendor. Data models and database architecture. Data modeling is the process of creating an architecture diagram that represents the entities and their corresponding relationship within a corporate database. Data models starts at the logic level outlining business units and end up at the detailed physical database level which includes memory allocation, file allocation, and data types. In this section, we have included two ethical issues you may face which performing database architecture function and creating data models. Reusing data models from previous jobs. Is this okay? If an employer requires that you sign a non-disclosure agreement of non-compete, read it carefully before you sign. Have a legal representation review it so that you are aware of what you are giving over in regard to your own intellectual property and that of the hiring company. Creation of database specifications. What if they're not building it right? Often the details of technology can mystify non-technical management. They may throw around the latest hot ideas in IT and say that they are implementing them. Try to keep your management team informed of what technical developments and to be proactive in explaining what you are building from them and what you are not building. This may save them some embarrassment and prevent the company from misrepresenting itself technologically. Obtaining knowledge from the data. DBAs are privy to an incredible amount of client, coworker, and business information. Therefore, database administration is a trusted rule within the organization. This means that DBA is trusted with information that is for confidential nature and should be handled with discretion and sensitivity. It is important for the DBA to handle this power and their fingertips in an ethical manner. Knowledge regarding coworkers' pay from the data. Should you say something? The role of the DBA provides many challenges. The DBA has access to detailed client records, credit card information, employee payroll data, and much more. In some cases, the legal and government requirements for how this data should be handled in regarding to privacy. In other cases, there are no legal requirements or company policies, and it is up to the DBA to determine what their own personal ethics are in relation to the information they have at their fingertips. Knowledge regarding private company information. Should you look as an administrator of backup and replication services, reviewing data entrusted to you should be done when necessary as part of your job function. Reviewing data for noisy purposes should not be done. However, there are no rules against it in most cases. Knowledge of private personal information, security versus invasion of privacy. Reviewing sensitive information about ISP clients is a touchy issue. By reviewing what sites they visit, you may obtain information that someone trying to learn how to build bomb or other terrorist activity, which could target your company and hurt other people. However, customers' information must have some level of privacy. Check your customer agreement and clients have with your company to determine what you can legally do with the client information to balance out your rule of security versus invasion of personal privacy.
Ascertaining data requests from users. First is handling unusual requests for data. Is there a clear policy? Second, assessing management requests for data. What is the procedure? Next is providing sensitive data via email. So, handling unusual requests for data. Is there a clear policy? So if you work for one that does not have clear policy in regard to data access, it is a judgment call on your part to provide data to the business users. Use your common sense and always keep in mind the rules of information security even if your company does not address them. Next is assessing management requests for data. What is the procedure? Try to stay as responsible and neutral as possible, but do not give in to company politics to the point where it hinders your job responsibility. If your company does not have clearly defined policy regarding data access, Set up a policy and propose it to the IT and business managers of the company. Next is providing sensitive data via email. Sending sensitive data out on email is always dangerous. This is especially true for a company-wide mass emailing. It is your responsibility as the DBA to think through these scenarios and find solution that does not hinder the business but refrains from exposing company information to competitors. So next is massaging and cleaning data. So changing the data for marketing purposes, is it legal? Exaggerating sales data for your boss, are you painting a false picture? Next is changing the data for marketing purposes, is it legal? Not reporting on sections of data when it is not required is less of an issue than actually altering data. This problem ventures into the area of legal issues and should be handled with utmost care and responsibility. Keep in mind law and your own personal ethics when making decisions to format financial or marketing data. Next is exaggerating sales data for your boss. Are you painting a false picture? DBAs receive requests when they have to generate status report from sales data. Salespeople can be very persuasive in such circumstances. First, make sure that you will not be painting a false picture of the data for considering altering a report based on projections or improved status. Next is data forecasting and trend analysis. Data forecasting tools that fudge results. Should you end the relationship with the vendor? Pulling inaccurate trend analysis graphs, what will be the result? Data forecasting tools that fudge results. Should you end the relationship with the vendor? Keep tabs on all vendor tools that fall under your domain and stay in close relationship with the vendor. Making determinations to end a vendor relationship based on problems with their software should be carefully considered. So, pulling inaccurate trend analysis graphs, what will be the result? When you must make determinations on whether to pull reports at the last minute due to inaccuracies in data, keep in mind the results of both scenarios, which is, what kind of effect will there be if your boss walks into a room with no report versus your boss walking in with an inaccurate report that he can explain. So thank you for listening. So that was our report for database administration. Thank you very much.